Okay, welcome, DrupalCon Prague, day 2. Good stuff. This is core conversation about the history and future of Drupal theming. Hopefully you enjoyed the session description. I hope this is as entertaining as the session description is. This is based on a session I gave at a Drupal camp a few months ago that was more about the history, and it was more a narrative of how we got to where we are in the theme system. And it didn't have a lot of like forward-looking, what's next stuff. This contains less history and more forward-looking stuff because it is a core conversation. And hopefully we'll have plenty of time to have like, what about this, what about that? This is, I will say this too, it's rated as an expert level session, so it assumes you know a lot about the theme layer in terms of the architecture and how it works. And it's also not much about like HTML, but more about like the underlying systems of like the theme registry and things like that. So if you feel comfortable with that stuff and you feel comfortable a little bit with object-oriented code, then you're in the right place because we're going to kind of talk about those kinds of things. We're also going to talk about render API. And if that seems boring or intimidating and you get bored, you can leave, and I won't be offended. I understand, because it is a very hard subject. So my name is Carl Wiedemann. I'm C4RL on Drupal.org, and I have worked some on the Twig initiative, especially at the beginning. And I've been working more, well, I've been a little quiet lately, but I'm more interested in kind of the future of render API. And this is actually going to talk a lot about render API going forward. So my goals today are to talk about where we've been, where are we going, and then have discussion and planning and see like who might be interested in this or questions you might have about the future here. So I'm going to go kind of year by year and discuss what has kind of happened. What did we get in Drupal over the years? If you go back in the commit history, you can look in the Git history all the way back to the year 2000, which is kind of fascinating about Git and just the Git migration. And you can see some of those first commit messages. And we actually did have a theme system in the very first incarnation of Drupal. And the idea that existed from the start was having an overridable system. And so throughout the years, I'm going to talk about kind of ideas that we've come across and that we want to preserve, because not all our ideas are bad. Some of our implementations are bad, but not all of the ideas are bad. So we had overridable markup. In 2001, we were able to provide default markup. That is, you would only have to override certain things, and that other things would be provided by default. For example, the node module provides default node markup. So that was something that didn't exist in 2000. Is a theme had to describe every single thing that possibly could be rendered on a site. In 2002, we actually finally had the theme function as kind of an API to get into, okay, how do I actually create markup? How do I pull things out on my own? And in 2003, everything before then was concatenated together. And we still have some concatenation that exists in core, which is not that easy to use, especially if you're a newcomer, because you don't want to dig through a PHP file. So we first had template-based theming back in 2003, and it was a system called Xtemplate. Has anyone used Xtemplate before? Wow. Oh, well, he doesn't count. Xtemplate is not very powerful. And so in 2005, PHP template came along. And this is, a lot of other things came along too in 2005, but this was kind of our first modern theming system, is we had templates that had logic in them. We could override the variables that were sent to those templates. That's what's called preprocessor functions now. People familiar with preprocessor functions? Good. And then Form API, which wasn't related to theming yet, arrived. And altering arrives in concept, the idea of a form alter, and providing an API for people to abstract structure. And that eventually became very important in the future. In 2007, we finally had a theme registry that was a lot more performant in terms of keeping track of the templates that were being overridden, the functions that were being overridden. We had preprocess functions in name. That's when they were finally called preprocess functions. And we had template file overrides. You could describe those yourself. Also in 2007, this has to do with kind of the form API world, is we finally had hook elements and the idea of structured versus rendered data, which brought together the idea of the modern render API. And so this is what we saw in Drupal 7. And before this, we didn't really have render API. We were just kind of concatenating strings together. How many people were Drupal 6 developers? Yeah. So you just had strings. And you just mashed them all together, and it was kind of a pain. And so this started the phase called alter all of the things, which is where you had the page array and hook node view and things of that nature, where we wanted to abstract structure. And the way that we do that in Drupal, like we do everything else in Drupal, is we just build up this big associative array and hope that people are going to dig through that whole big thing. And that seems like an okay idea to start with. It's kind of like when the only tool you have is a hammer, everything looks like a nail. And so when the only tool you have is an associative array, everything you build is an associative array. And so there's this is the kind of the famous comment back in 2007 about how we should returning structured data. And so this is the big shift that happens. And if you're a Drupal 6 developer or Drupal 5 developer, you remember this. And then in Drupal 7, we were supposed to do this. But there was actually a lot of this living in Drupal 7, unfortunately. And so by this time, we had hook page alter, we had preprocessor functions, we had global preprocessors. We could override templates, we could override the preprocessors themselves, we could override theme functions, we could actually change the theme registry, so we could register different templates or functions in there. And this was, by 2009, we just had this big stack of APIs, and they were all brought in for good reasons, but by different people and with different intentions. It was very inconsistent. It was very difficult to learn. And around this time is when you've probably seen this picture, and maybe you've seen this version too, but this is John Albin Wilkins basically describing what the theme architecture had become. And I think what's important to realize about Drupal's theme system, and maybe Drupal itself, and maybe even just kind of a lot of open source projects, is we have systems that no one sits down and designs. No one sat down with this and drew it up and said, this is what we're going to use. This came about over years and years and years. And there are things that we have, there are ideas that are part of the theme system that have been there for a long time. And it's not the ideas that are bad, it is the implementation of those ideas. Yeah. Put that on your remember that. So I think we reached a time in around DrupalCon Denver. There was a core conversation about how screwed up theming was. That I think is where we first saw this graphic, and it was this time where we said we really have a really hard system. It's so brittle. What if we started over? And so I think this was. This brought about this idea of, based on what we've built, what do we need? And I'm kind of going to distill this into three things that I think we need, but we can talk about this. This is a core conversation if people have other ideas. I think we need kind of three basic things. We need template-based markup that can be extended and overridden. That's pretty basic. The things that we invented to give us that were things like hook theme, preprocessors, theme hook suggestions, theme registry, Twig, what used to be PHP template. All of this is for the idea of overriding and having templates for markup. We need an abstracted alterable structure. And this is what came out of that comment by Barry Jasmine in 2007. And so this was what gave us render arrays, what gave us hook node view, hook page alter, things like that, where we have this renderable thing that we can pass around. When you create a block, you return this abstracted structure. And I think the third thing we need is a sensible, accessible API. And this is really the big missing part. And we've had some kind of things that have tried to give us this. I mean, the theme function, Drupal render, hide and show have kind of been tools in order to deal with a lot of the underlying architecture. But I think the underlying architecture is really the big problem. And as nice as Twig looks, there are certain things that we just cannot do easily because of that underlying architecture. And so we had a core conversation in Denver. The Twig initiative was started. We had one of the biggest sprints in Portland I've ever seen for Twig. There's a huge, the enthusiasm about Twig is awesome, but there's still a lot to be done. And we've done some great things. We've killed the process layer that was part of the theme system. We're cleaning up markup. A lot of people are excited about Twig, and it's a good thing. So all that's kind of where we went. There's some current issues I want to talk about. That's kind of where we're going, and then I want to talk about kind of looking ahead, and I hope that is interesting to folks. So these are some kind of current issues that are on my mind, kind of, I think, in increasing importance to me personally. There's probably some other ones that maybe you guys have seen, and I'm going to jump to D.O to talk about these things. So the famous node 1757550, one of my favorites. This was the big, let me go to that node. Here we are. Convert the core theme functions to Twig templates. So this is still active. A lot of this was the basis for the sprint and the entire Twig initiative. A lot of this is done. There are a few things left, and we have great momentum on here. Scott Reeves, Fabian X, Jen Lampton, Joel, all those folks have done awesome work here, and I've worked on this quite a bit too. So this is just finishing up. When I say kill concatenation, I mean we want everything to be in Twig, and Twig is a template-based system, so no more concatenated markup. We want that to go away, and hopefully we can make it performant enough so that it can go away. Question? Can you offer an example of what the concatenated markup is? So sure. So the question was an example of concatenated markup. Let me actually. Actually, that would have to be D7.
Certainly, you have D7 installed somewhere.
Well, I just need to open the code base. So in theme.inc, like theme table. Oops, sorry. So theme table is an example of when I say concatenated markup, I mean we're concatenating a big string together. There are lots of things in theme.inc that do that. Theme table, theme item list, theme menu, theme 8, some silly things, theme username. That's hard for themers to use. That was one of the big motivations for Twig, is to make that more accessible. So that's happening. There's a lot of good momentum on that. Some of you who will be at the sprint this Friday can check that out. The next one I mentioned, I think, is theme system architecture changes. This, I think, is a little is happening and is contingent on a few other things. But did anyone go to the Twig talk yesterday with Scott and Jen and Fabian? And anybody go to that one? A few people? Okay. What we'd like to do here is make the names of the current functions a little bit more clear and maybe change where they are executed. So a lot of this has to do with when we use suggest templates for a given theme callback that is actually done in a preprocessor right now. We want to take that out into its own API so that you can suggest templates elsewhere, which is really important because a preprocessor is at runtime and that needs to run before then. It should be part of the registry. Other things here is changing the name of a preprocessor to called prepare, which is actually what a preprocessor is doing. The problem with the word preprocess is it means different things to different people. To a themer, it means I'm going to change things that are useful. To a developer and someone who cares about the execution stack, it means this possibly unnecessary layer of functionality. That's what preprocess. It's before we actually process. So that I believe is in progress. I don't know if there are much patches here. I think it's a lot of discussion right now. But this is definitely something that. How many comments we got so far? Oh, only 35. Easy. So that's going on too, and I think that is something that we're hoping to get into D8. The next one that is related to that I think is a little stalled is rewrite the theme registry into a proper service. A lot of the theme system has not kind of been pushed into the kind of Drupal 8 paradigm of having services and plugins and these things that are kind of more abstracted and things that we can move around better. For example, there's this function called theme init, and theme init is actually called the first time you actually call a theme function, and that actually creates, figures out what is the global theme and does all this configuration stuff. And that's called when you call a theme function. So if you call a theme function in like hook boot or something like that, sometimes really weird things can happen there. So this is an effort to abstract that better, bring it up to speed with Drupal 8. And I think there's been mostly chatter there, a few patches, but some like Do we need to wait on something else? So there's some other issues that are contingent on that I won't get into the details of, but that's an interesting thing too. This is kind of my pet issue in the last few months that I unfortunately haven't had a chance to work on that much, but I've got this army of people, well, at least one guy who's awesome, working on it. And what this is this is trying to solve, where's my slides? Hello. One second here. I lost my slides. Well, that's how it goes. Shoot. I just had them open. Yeah. Let me actually, I never do that 4 fingers. Maybe there's an open recent? It's somewhere, it's in the cloud. Who knows where it is? Okay. To the cloud. Sorry, to the cloud. Where is, let's try this again. Full screen. Oh, yeah, so what I was saying is there was a lot, see this top thing? There was a lot of this left in Drupal 7, which wasn't supposed to happen. Everything was supposed to be this. Everything was supposed to be the nice array. And so there's all this pre-rendering of markup going on. And so I actually did this big grep and was like, this is silly. If we're gonna fix Drupal render, which is kind of my pet project for Drupal 9, and you're gonna hear all about, we need to fix this. And so that's what that is. And so a lot of that is done, which is great. There's a few other things that need tests, but that's awesome. That's the power of Drupal. You get people excited about something and they go and do it. Full screen again. Four fingers where? Where does it work? Oh my gosh. All right, I'm not used to this thing. I just got this computer. It's a new one. Okay. So those are kind of things that I feel like are important. But when in Portland, aside from just the weather there was this kind of cloud that came over me about the Twig initiative, because one thing that Twig tries to do and wants to do is give us a drillable structure in the template. And so you have a variable and you want to drill into that variable. So content.image, content.image.source, and to be able to drill through that thing. That's not something we've had before. It definitely doesn't exist in Drupal 7, and it's probably not going to exist in Drupal 8 as nice as we would like it to. So that became this very bothersome thing to me, because I know there's going to be a lot of people coming into Drupal because of the Symfony things and the Twig things. But really that is due to a brittle render API. And so I believe that for the future of Drupal theming, the biggest thing we have to deal with is a brittle render API. And the second point of that is I think render API must move to an object-oriented design if we're going to make any progress here. And that may not surprise many people. A lot of things in Drupal are moving that way. A lot of things in a lot of frameworks as they evolve move that way. So this is an issue that I started around that time. And I don't think it's not going to happen for Drupal 8, but I think will become a meta issue that I plan to focus on quite a bit, and I'd love other people's help for Drupal 9. And let me actually show you kind of what inspired this. I don't know if anybody saw when I tweeted this, but like this is basically where Render API has taken us. And if you were a themer, or if you're someone who is just looking at the data structure of what you get when you are given theme variables, this is a lot. And the problem with this is everybody just puts things in here, and they're just passed along. How many people have had to dig through this stuff? And isn't that just like, you find it, you're just like, why am I doing this? And like, this has some of my participation has dwindled a bit, because I'm trying to kind of not think in this world, and there are a lot of kind of workarounds where we still have to add these little hash parameters that are going to call callbacks and stuff. But we can see things in here. Maybe you can read some of this stuff, but here's an example. We're passing view mode, we're passing state, which are properties of the node itself, and like, why is it on field picture? It doesn't make any sense. Field picture should talk to the node and say, what is your view mode? If I am a child of view. We have properties here that have vastly different impacts. For example, theme versus title. Title is just a string, but theme is actually a callback that this whole thing is going to be sent to. So it's kind of like a method if you're thinking about object orientation. We pass data in this thing. It's like the field should know it's a part of the node. It shouldn't have to like include the node as part of that. We see a lot of references that are passed through here. Some things aren't passed by reference. There's duplicate information. We have items, and then we have 0. And the children of items are the same as this. And why are they the same? Yes, sir.
The reason that's happening is like if you think of it in terms of say image field has a widget that lets you connect the image back to the node that it actually appears on. So it
Right.
has to have it passed.
Sure. Well, I just want to mention.
I asked the exact same question earlier this week.
Exactly. Yeah. And so when all you have is an array, you have to use array-like things to get information out and in. We have entity representation of its array. For example, this is a file entity, which exists in Drupal 7, but it is an array of things. The data in this actually lacks any relevancy to the rendered state. So we have public, but that's, we have to pass that to URI to resolve that into a source. And so you can get what you want. You just have to really dig, and it's a lot of work. And I don't think anyone is going to defend this as good design. If you want to, feel free to take the mic, and that'll be an interesting conversation. But this is really bothersome to me. And so my pet issue now is, there we go. I learn new things all the time. Okay. Is this node 1843798? And this right now is a meta issue, but it's about refactoring render API to be object-oriented. And so I want to take just a few minutes to talk about what that looks like. I also have a GitHub project that you can dig into the code. If we want to dig into the code, we can do that. I don't know how enthused people are about that. Or we can just talk about theming issues, theming problems, things that come up, what should be easier. The code that I have in this GitHub project, I haven't thought a lot about API in terms of like what do people want to use. I'm just thinking about design, like how do the internals work. I think one thing that successful frameworks do is give kind of a non-intimidating API and then kind of more detailed methods. So one thing that comes to mind is like jQuery. jQuery, you have like the slide down method, but then you have the animate method, right? And so you have this kind of abstraction for the sake of learning. You also, the get method versus the Ajax method, and there are higher level APIs. So, in terms of API, the implementation of that's an open book right now. I'm just thinking about what does the design look like. So I bring this up in the render API issue. This is what I just talked about, is like content.fieldimage.0, and then you want to build your own image tag in Twig, right? We can't do this yet. I would love to be able to do this. But you're going to have to set up that source in a preprocessor and then pass it to the template. The reason we can't do this is, bear with me here, field image. So let's say this is in a node template. Field image has a separate template. If it has a separate template, it has a separate preprocessor. If we are in the node template, we haven't drilled down to that yet. And because we haven't drilled down to that preprocessor yet, that preprocessor has not created those variables yet. And so those variables don't exist. I can't, from the parent template, drill into this. I can't get to attribute source because it hasn't been made yet. So I have some ideas about how we can do that. I don't know if it can happen in Drupal 8. It's very hard to do when you have these arrays. Maybe it could. I have some other examples on this node where it's like, let's say, instead of building the image tag itself, you just want the first image using a field formatter. Maybe you want all of the images from the field image. Maybe you just want all the content. Or maybe, and then here's another example where, I say, this goes for everything. This includes links. This includes, dates and all that other stuff. So I kind of started thinking about, what this could look like in Drupal 9. And I have a few meta tasks, and there was some chatter. But this is relatively new, and I would love some help. I would love some thoughts on this, and I've run a few ideas by a few people, but that's kind of my next pet project. And I was going to talk about what this looks like if people are interested, but there's a question. Go ahead.
I just going back to what you were just talking about, and this may be opening a huge can of worms in terms of what templates are gotten first. And I really haven't delved into this, and so what I'm suggesting might be total crap.
Okay. Hey, I just remembered this. Can you actually talk into the mic because we're recording this? I'm sorry, I forgot.
Sorry.
Go ahead. No, it's my fault.
Okay, so first caveat or disclaimer: I haven't researched the whole templating system and the bigger templates, the smaller templates, blah blah blah.
Uh-huh.
But when you're rendering a page, it just occurs to me like you kind of know what you have to drill down. Could you theoretically drill down first, know what all your bits are going to be, know what your building blocks are going to be, and where they're going to fit in? Get those first, and then as you build back up, you could do exactly what you were looking to do.
Yeah,
That's
and
theoretically possible.
Yeah, definitely. And so does everyone understand the question? The question is like, well, if you have everything there, why can't you just drill everything and then access it? Part of the reason that we don't do that is we don't know what we want to render, and we want to avoid unnecessary processing. So, for example, you could have this big render array, and maybe you're only going to render like let's say things have assembled all these pieces. So let's say you're rendering a node, and let's say the node has a whole bunch of fields, but in this particular display, you only want to show the first field. You only want to show that one, okay?
But don't you have that information?
Well, hold on a second. Just let me talk through this. So let's say you have you have it, but maybe the preprocessor is doing certain things. The preprocessor is creating classes that it's going to exist on that markup, but we don't want to waste processing power processing all those classes for all those fields if they're not going to be displayed. We only want to do it if it's going to be displayed, and that's why render goes outside in. It used to go inside out, but now it goes. Does that make sense?
Like I said, I don't have enough background.
Sure. Okay.
I get what you're saying.
Do other people kind of understand that concept? Is we want to do late calculation of template variables because we may not be ever displaying that. Yes.
Isn't Twig doing that already for you? Like, it has to generate classes based upon all of the Twig files that you wrote, and those classes know what variables are going to be.
Well, so Twig gives us some advantages here, and that was something I acknowledged in the drillable issue, was to say, look, we may not be able to do this for all theming engines and render API itself, but can we get this working in the Twig theming engine? I think that is possible. I personally don't know enough about Twig, the Twig engine, to say, like, can we figure that out? If Fabian were here, he would say yes, and then he'd give this long explanation that I wouldn't understand, but he might be able to do it. I would love to do it in the API. I would because of the third principle I said. I want something accessible that we can drill into, whether we're using PHP template or whether we're using Twig. So here's what this might look like. Now, this is just something that I've thrown together. How many people have done like a bit of OO? Some folks? Okay. So I'm going to just talk about two kind of very vague, two design patterns that have been influential. How many people have worked with design patterns? Much? Okay. So two of them that I'm thinking about for this are builder and decorator. And I'll describe kind of what these are vaguely and how they would apply. So we'll talk about builder first. The builder pattern is that the creation of an object is delegated to a series of steps and then finally invoked. So you kind of get all the ingredients together, and then finally you invoke what you want to create. You don't create it right away and then add things later. You don't get everything at once and then create it. You do things step by step. It's similar to a factory pattern. The only real difference is kind of philosophical, is that builder doesn't assume you have all the information to start with. Factory generally does, but the difference is kind of not that much. So this fulfills the data storage component of a renderable. Here's a very simple factory. We have a car builder, and the car builder takes parameters about the car, and maybe it doesn't want to make the car right away. It wants to get things and talk to other systems, and then it's going to build the car at the end. So this is a very silly kind of example, but this is I think the builder pattern, are kind of builder-esque Drupalisms we have, are like the render array itself. Building up this render array, like hook node view and hook page alter, is that we are adding things to this big array, and so we're building onto that, and once everything is there, then we render it. So that feels like a builder to me. The next pattern I want to talk about is decorator. The decorator pattern is that behavior is added to an object dynamically at runtime without affecting other objects of the same class. And I feel that this reflects like runtime variable preparation. So basically, preprocessing is a decorator. Here's a decorator example. I'll just kind of run through this. Let's say you have a coffee class that says, I'm a cup of coffee. And then what you do is you create a separate class called a decorator. And what that is going to do is that's going to take the coffee object, you pass it a coffee object, and it's just going to delegate methods to that. So it's kind of like a delegator. Then what you do is you create two decorators that call the parent, that basically extend the parent, and they can say, oh, I'm adding this and I'm adding this. And then what you do is you decorate your original object at the bottom. So I'm saying I'm creating coffee, I'm going to give it sugar and cream. And what that does is sugar wraps the original. It's going to call the original. It's going to say I am coffee with sugar. And then cream wraps that, and it's going to call the parent, which is sugar. And it's going to say I'm coffee with sugar, I'm with cream. That's how that works. That's basically a decorator pattern. So you need this third thing that is delegating functionality there. The reason I feel like this is like a preprocessor is that if you're familiar with preprocessors, you know that we have every module in successive order is wrapping the variables that are sent to the template. So comment comes, and then node will come, and then other things will come in and wrap the variables that's being sent to whatever template you have. Finally, your theme comes in, and at any given point, you can change any of those variables, but we're wrapping everything with more and more functionality. So that feels kind of like a decorator to me. These are builder and decorator are kind of similar, and they could be interchangeable. Both of these Drupalisms, I think, could be reflected as either one. I just want to show kind of like a sample implementation of what this might be. So here's basically our render process. This hasn't changed. This is what a website is. We get our data. We define a renderable. We alter the renderable if we need to. That's our hook node view and hook page alter and things like that. And then we render the renderable, which we're going to call theme callbacks. We're going to call preprocessors. We're going to call formatters, which are actually just theme callbacks, and then invoke a template. And by that point, we have a bunch of markup, and then we send the markup to whatever client we need through whatever delivery mechanism. And so the builder kind of comes in here in the alter phase, is where we're going to kind of call out to our modules and say, okay, I've defined this base. Maybe it's an empty page. What do you want to give me? You want to give me blocks? You want to give me nodes? You want to give me a view? Great. And then when in our preprocess phase, that's when we say, okay, I've built up the variables. How do you want to change those? How do you want to improve those? How do you want to give me more functionality? Okay, so I'm going to show some code. And I know that in Drupal, we love to say, well, I don't like how that's named, or can you change the hyphen to a dot? And let's not worry about that too much. This is just kind of about ideas. And I know that's really hard to do, and we all do it, but let's just maybe think about, here's an idea that I've had, and then you can write me nasty messages on the GitHub project if you want to get into it. So here's kind of what I'm thinking. Here's a very simple example. So D7 and D8, we have our render array, right? We're going to theme node. We're passing a variable called node. That is some node object. D9, what I want to do is have a builder. That builder is eventually going to create something that will be themed. And that's going to have a class. But I don't want to create the class right away, because I might want to change what that class is. That's the equivalent of like, in this render array, maybe I want to change what pound theme is. Maybe I want to alter that to be something else. So with a builder, what it allows you to do is the final delegated state of what the renderable will be is passed as an argument. And so the builder takes, what do I want the final themed output to be? And then what are my variables here? And we don't have to use hash anymore. We can just say, give me a node. This is what altering would look like. So, okay, I have a renderable. I'm going to assume we're still going to use kind of hook node view and altering hooks. Maybe we're going to change that, but I don't know if there's any effort to do that. Here's what this would be like. Here's hook node view, right? So you're given a node, you have the content array. On the image field, you want to change the theme callback to foo. and that's going to call theme foo on that field. Here's how it might work with the builder. So the builder is passed to some view alter, maybe called node view alter. Maybe it's an alter on whatever renderable you have. The builder has a method to get the image parameter. It's going to set a build class. That's just overriding this first argument here. So I said, you know what, instead of this renderable using theme node, I'm going to use theme foo. And that's going to change the finally invoked renderable. And I'll show you what the invoked renderable is. So once the builder is done, it's actually going to create that thing. It's going to create something called theme foo or theme node full. And that is going to be something that has a template, that has a preprocessor. It's basically what a theme callback is. A theme callback has a template. It has a preprocessor. It lives in hook theme. What used to live in hook theme is going to be a class. Maybe it is. Maybe it won't be. This is how it could work. Here's how preprocessing, variable preparation worked in D7 and D8. Was you had a preprocessor and you said new title. I want to change. So these are the variables that are in the template itself. I want to change title to be something else. I'm going to set it there. But and this is the problem with arrays. Is you have to know the structure of the array. You have to dig into the array to know what it is. And with objects, you just have to know a method. You say set this to be this, and then forget about it. You don't have to know the structure. So this is what like a theme class could look like. Theme foo extends a renderable. A renderable is an abstract class, which means it's never invoked. It just has child classes that extend its base methods. One of its methods is prepare. That is basically a preprocessor. And then here you can say, get my node, get the title, add some text to it, and then reset the title. Title being the title that is in the template. Question?
So, I mean, this is great for that theme function, but that's not really how it works in Drupal today.
I know.
Okay.
This isn't in Drupal today. Yeah.
No, I just mean like in terms of what we do in Drupal, a lot of people could hang on that and hop on this reprocess.
Can you say it into the mic and say it again? Sorry. I didn't quite understand what you meant.
Oh, hello, that's hot.
Hello,
okay.
Chris.
Yeah, I'm just saying a preprocess isn't only available for one
Sure.
person but
Exactly.
in your case it would be here.
Well, this is going to be decorated. So this will be decorated, and that's so maybe that'll be answered as I talk some more. Okay, so the rest of this I think goes into render API, but the idea is that this is going to be so in, for example, node module. You have template preprocess node. That sets up the base variables for node.tpl.php. And then you have like my theme preprocess node. Those are the decorators. And so we'll have decorate classes that go on this. So anyway, if you fire up your GitHub and go on over to github.com/c4rl/render-API, you can see some examples of this. And I'll just show a little bit of the code, but then I think we should go into like questions and stuff like that. So what I have, oh my goodness, hold on a second. Here we are. Okay. This right now is not hooked up to Drupal. I have a directory called fake Drupal. It fakes Drupal. Doesn't do anything. It's not a content management system. Here I'm doing exactly what I was saying before. I have a renderable builder. I'm going to invoke this class, and here's a node. So this is like a dummy node, and fake Drupal has a fake node module. The fake node module just returns like a silly thing. Here's fake node module. You ready? Yeah. So the idea here is we create the builder, and then we have like a deliver function. This is like the page delivery mechanism. So in fake Drupal, I have something down here called deliver. What it's going to do is look at our built thing. It can be an array of renderables, or it can be a renderable builder itself. It's going to call something called create. That's going to build the renderable. If I go into the renderable builder, so I have something that takes the build class. It takes the parameters. There's some setters and some getters. Very simple. And then this is basically our builder model. It's going to get some alter callbacks. It's going to basically parse through everything and create subrenderables. It's going to get whatever module decorator classes we have, and then whatever theme decorator classes we have. So let me do some hand waving and show you kind of the idea here. So imagine this is our Drupal site. So we've got node.tpl.php. This is our node template. It says I am a node, and it's going to give me a title variable. Let's say this is our preprocessor. So we have a class called ThemeFullNode. This is like our hook theme implementation. It has some registered template with this. This could be an annotation. This could be in YAML. This could be somewhere else. I don't really care. This is just for the example that I'm doing here. We have a prepare phase. And what that's doing is it's getting the node and just setting it as a template variable. So this is a template variable. Maybe not some, maybe there's parts of the node that we don't want to be in the template, and it spits it out. So let's say we have a alter callback. So in my fake Drupal.php, here's my like fake alter registry. So let's say this is not how it will really work. This is just an example. Let's say I have an alter function. I have a module called my module. This is hook node view. And so here's my module. My module, hook node view. It's going to receive some build. And what I'm going to do is change the build class to theme foo. And let's say I have a theme foo class. It's going to register a new template. And then it's going to set the title variable as overridden by theme foo. So I uncommented that code. And if I go in and I reset this, let's look at foo.tpl.php. Here's foo.tpl.php. It says I am module foo.tpl.php. It's going to give the title, which I've preprocessed. It says I am node123 overridden by theme foo. And then I have a new variable, which I set to bar. So I did this in, this is the builder. This is like hook node view. This is something else. This is altering the builder itself. So once the builder is altered, what it does is it will create whatever class it's been given. And so, when I altered that, it turned into theme foo. But I could change it to something else, or then I could decorate that. So in fake Drupal, I go to, that's in, it's in the renderable builder. The thing that's doing the building is I'm going to get module decorator classes. So this is some registry. Get a decorator class and then wrap it. This is like the coffee with the cream and the coffee with the other stuff. I wrap it in a decorator. So there could be module decorators and theme decorators. Module decorators are like module template preprocessors. Theme decorators are basically the theme preprocessor. So what I'm going to do, I have a fake module decorator. Let me just not override this anymore. Here's the module decorator. So I'm going to say, if it's a full node, use my module full node decorator. And so I have my module full node decorator. What it's going to do is just going to use the parent template that's given by what the parent class is. It's going to prepare the parent variables, and it's going to change that. So this one I'm saying modified by my module full node decorator. So if I go here and refresh, it's using the parent template. I am modules node, so it's using the core template, but it's overriding the variable. And let's pretend our theme is also overriding this too. So I have a theme called Prague. And here's themes, Prague. Prague full node decorator, Prague full node decorator is going to use a new template. So this is something we do in themes all the time. We register a new template. That's done automatically because existing, so it would probably work the same way. And then I'm going to add a new variable called subtitle, called here is subtitle. And then in my Prague node, I'm going to say I am themes Prague node.tpl.php. I'm going to print the title and I print the subtitle. So I think I uncommented that code. And so here's my theme decorator. So now I'm overriding the template. The title is being overridden by module decorators, which is what module preprocess functions do. And then I'm adding a new variable via the theme layer. Another thing I do here is you'll notice that the renderable had methods like get and set. So this is getting those subparameters. That is how I think we should do things in, that's basically the equivalent of the dots that appear in the twig function. You'll notice something that I do here, and this I think answers the question that this gentleman had, and I think the question we have in Drupal 8, is when you get something, if we haven't prepared, if we haven't done the preprocessing, then run it. And in object-oriented code, that's really easy to figure out. It's not that easy it hasn't been that easy to figure out in render arrays. So this says like, if I haven't prepared anything, then run the prepare function. So that's the idea. So those of you who've never seen object-oriented code before, you're probably falling asleep. I apologize for that. Some people are hopefully really excited by this. Again, this is in fake Drupal land, but I think the concepts are there. The concept is like, we need accessors, we need ways of overriding certain things but not other things, and we need some sort of registry. So I have about 15 minutes left, which is not as much time as I wanted, but I'm just curious if there's any feedback on this kind of stuff. You can check out the GitHub project, or if people have other like what about this, and what about other things in theming. Thank you for sitting through all that. Okay. Yes, sir.
So with regard to like actually changing the class, can you just pull up the code where you're doing that?
Certainly.
Not
Yeah,
that
so that's in right here. So I'm changing the build class to be something else.
Okay,
Yeah.
but those build classes, I mean, they could extend the class that was there, but they may not because you don't really know.
Right, and so that's a good question. So the question is, why isn't this a decorator? Maybe why isn't this wrapping it?
Yeah, I mean, to a certain degree. Well, no, I like the power that you have here.
Okay.
I guess like there should just be some sort of interface enforcing it, right? I mean, like you can't just toss some other class at it and be like, "Woo, you can render nodes."
Sure. Yeah. So okay. So that's a interesting point. Is he's asking? So you're just setting an arbitrary class on here, but theme foo, it just says extends renderable. It doesn't say extends theme full node. That may be something that is worthwhile to say. Okay, you can only use this class to extend this other class. I mean, yes, that's kind of a nice thing, but at the same time, there are lots of things in Drupal. I mean, with a render array, you can put whatever you want in there. You know what I mean? So you could put a WordPress site in a render array, I guess. You know?
Pay the consequences
Yeah, I know.
too.
So could we use the system to get just the data and not the rendered output? So I'm thinking about, if we wanted to have template rendering on the front end,
Mm-hmm.
but we need the prepared data to sort of match the templates,
Mhm.
send them separately.
Right. Yeah. So I think what answers that question, I think, is separating the builder from the renderable itself.
Mm-hmm.
When we set up the builder, we give it some initial variables, and that's like a render array. When you have a render array, you're giving it some certain variables, but variables that apply to the template specifically, like classes and other HTML related things, those are created in the preprocessor. And so that's kind of the difference between the renderable builder as an object and I think the renderable itself as an object, is that in the builder, that's kind of like the storage component of the render array. And so what's nice, I think, about that is the builder kind of represents the abstracted structure. And so whether that turns into HTML or whether that turns into JSON or whether it turns into something else, you have an abstracted structural thing. And by virtue of being in a website, it's turned into HTML, but it could turn into other things. Does that kind of answer your question?
Yeah, definitely. Because one of the questions we're going to ask in the backbone BOF is, how do we get templates, like Twig templates, shared across the server and the
Mhm.
front end? Because if you get the template without the data, you're essentially, if you're just getting like
Right.
a REST representation of an entity, you still have to do all that processing on the front end.
Right.
To prepare for the
Yeah,
template.
and so I saw that as kind of part of render API, is we have the render array itself, and then once the theme preprocessors run, we have all this other data that is specific to the templates, but maybe we don't want that to start with. And that kind of answers like, do we want to do that processing first? In this case, we don't. We just want the kind of abstracted structure.
Yeah, that would be great.
So I think it applies. I also think there's a lot of overlap with Entity Field API, which I haven't used that much, but like a lot of this getters and setters stuff, I think is very much. I don't want to bug those guys too much because this is like Drupal 9, and I don't want to like show up to their table in the coder lounge and be like, guys, let's talk about this. So, but I think that a lot of that applies too.
Yeah, I'm excited about that.
Cool. Yes, sir.
I just wanted to make like one quick caveat. I really like what you're doing with the builder. Just ideologically, I think that's really smart. Watch the decorators though. Plugins paid the price for that in spades. Decorators are great, like 1, maybe 2 levels, but the second you start doing more than that, like it gets really, really hard to figure out all the interaction patterns that are going on there.
Right.
So if you can essentially alter the params, which is basically what you're doing with that by some other methodology, I'd encourage you to research it.
Yeah, and that's a great point. And this was brought up by other folks, is like, as a themer, and maybe there are some people in this room who feel this way already, is this may be gobbledygook rather than like a simple preprocess an array of variables. And that's what I was kind of talking about, like public-facing API. Public-facing API may still be a processor, but the guts of it may be this. Now the problem with that is you're obscuring things, which I don't like doing. And I was talking to Mark Sonnenbaum earlier today about some of this stuff, and we were saying like, I think themers are smarter than we give them credit for. And he's like, yeah, they write JavaScript, and half of that stuff is like, gives people headaches. So yeah, next question.
Again, this might not make much sense, but I really think you should bug the entity API guys, because I
Mhm.
did go to the talk about REST API in Drupal 8, and it sounds like you're both tackling the same problem from a slightly different angle.
Yeah, totally.
It's a consistent representation of an entity.
Yeah.
So I see this as being both looking at the same issue, but
Right.
from slightly different angles.
It's not an entity. It is a abstracted structural element that doesn't necessarily represent content, which is kind of what an entity is. There are going to be entities in this. My example actually happens to be an entity itself, but this could be something like theme page or something like that. Yeah, and so it's kind of a higher level thinking of that. But definitely the accessors are the same kind of things they're doing.
It just would make sense that at the level here where you're representing entities, that it doesn't look completely different to.
Yeah, and we may just write wrapper classes that extend the entity accessor classes they're writing. Yep. I'd love your help on that.
One thing I've struggled with when theming is if I've got the generated source and I've got an HTML tag in there that I want to change,
Yes.
location where that is,
Yes.
which is partly because the system's so flexible and it could be in 50 different places.
Yes.
Does this help that at all? It still seems they're still in as many places and it still seems difficult to track that.
Yeah, I mean, extensibility is kind of a two-sided coin, I mean, it gives us that power, but then you have to say, well, where is this coming from? I haven't thought about that too much, but I think one thing that we get away from, you just swipe everything on these things these days. One thing we definitely get away from is, oh wait, it's not even in my slides. I'm sorry. We're getting away from this. And so, the nice thing about an object and like a builder is I can say get image and it's just going to give it to me. And I don't have to worry about where it is or where it came from or who it belongs to really. It's just going to be there. And I think one thing that I am also getting used to and is kind of tough is the idea of having to know where everything is all the time and knowing structure and having to inspect this to figure out where that is. Now, it's important to know how to override it. And in the old-fashioned Drupal, you had to know where it is to override it. If we give you a method and all you do is call a method and say set title to be this and you're done, then that where is it being done is less of a problem, I think. That's kind of a vague answer, but I think maybe we have.
To paraphrase your answer, I think you're saying that you'd probably be looking at smaller bits of data, so it might be easier to track down.
Yeah,
rather than
and
getting all of that array all the time.
yeah, and hopefully, you have an API, and instead of knowing an array structure, you know an API. That's kind of the distinction I see there. So maybe that's, yeah.
Hello again.
Hello.
I got really excited for a moment to think about describing the build object through a REST service, like get me pieces of a page
Yes.
at a certain URL and calling those back.
I'm gonna write that down. Yeah.
That would be phenomenal.
Okay.
So just wanted to mention.
Yeah, definitely. Good idea. Yes.
Can you pull back up your prepare statement you had somewhere? Maybe.
Sorry, in the code here.
Yeah, where you had a prepare statement up.
Oh,
earlier.
okay. Yeah. So this may have been in an renderable when we actually render it. So we're saying like, have we prepared the variables yet? If not, prepare them. Prepare is preprocess.
Preprocess.
Mark
So-
Sonnenbaum was like, why don't we call that pre-render? I'm like, we're not talking about an implementation. We'll call it something else. Yeah.
So, but you actually have an implementation of it somewhere in one of your classes here, like maybe.
Okay.
Full node.
Yeah, so I do. Yeah, so this is the abstract class. You always, I think for now, we always have to call the parent because the parent is going to tell that everything's been prepared in theme full node. But here is
This
the
what I'm
prepare.
looking
Yep.
for. So all right, I get that we should call prepare, and that makes great sense. But again, I'm not entirely sure why this is a decorator pattern at all, because you need to say, hey, prepare, and then like call an event, right? And anybody who's subscribed to that event can just do this set, because that's how you're setting properties. And I assume you have a getter as well, so they could get and manipulate the string if they
Totally.
want as well.
Mhm.
So I don't think, just to like try and kill this decorator pattern, that you need decorators at all for what it is you're proposing to do. Just drop a Symfony event right there and you're done.
And my Symfony knowledge is like, so I need
So
to.
like 3 minutes, we'll have it running.
Okay. Are we putting money on this?
Sure.
Okay.
A beer.
Yeah, that's something to think about. You know, yeah. I mean, this is fake Drupal. So this is living in my own, you know, just my own head. And this is why I kind of have been away from Drupal for a little while, because I'm like, I want to think about this in a very abstract way that conceptually fulfills it, but you know, this is just kind of implementation.
Implementation, yeah, totally. But I mean, you should probably be using the Symfony events since we do
Okay.
have them available, and you don't have to grab all of Drupal in order to get them.
Yeah.
And then you can absolutely fire off. You can dispatch an event there and have any class in the entire system that wants to change this. Change it right
Interesting.
there, and it'll be prepared.
I'll look into that.
Yeah, or hit me up on Friday. I'll help.
Okay, Friday. Sprint on Friday. Anyone else questions? I see some smiles, so hopefully I did okay. Anyway, please. Oh wait, please. Please take the survey. I have to show you this. Node 1863 on the website. And I'll hang out for a few minutes if you have other questions, but I think we're about at, well, we got 2 more minutes. So we can hang out for 2 minutes, or that's all I have. That's all my material, unless there are more questions.
30-minute break.
Oh, yeah, oh, well, geez. We can go long, we can go all day.
Start for 32 minutes.
Okay. Well, you're welcome to stay, but thank you for coming, and enjoy the rest of the conference, and enjoy beautiful Prague at the window here. So thank you.